Hey everyone, welcome to My Two Cents with Tawanda Harris. This is a podcast dedicated to educators, for educators, and by educators. Yes, it's all about encouraging, it's all about sharing strategies, it's all about going on an educational journey with each other. You are not alone, and I hope that when you finish listening to this podcast, you feel like you went on a journey with educators around the world. Thank you for tuning in to My Two Cents. Welcome, listeners. I'm so excited to be in conversation with Lisa Stringfellow. Today, we are going to have a wonderful conversation about the work that she is doing with students as well as in writing. Oh my goodness, I'm personally vested in this conversation because I've had so many conversations with teachers or educators that want to do writing the right way, but have certain parameters and restrictions around them. So just listen in on this conversation so we can hear all of the wonderful things that she is doing. And she has a surprise to share with us as well of some upcoming things that she's doing. So without further ado, Lisa, can you please share with us your teacher journey?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be with you and be one of your guests today. My teacher journey, so I'm going into my 28th year as a teacher, a classroom teacher. I spent my first 21 years at the same school and then was in Kentucky in an independent school. And then I moved back home to the East Coast to Boston, and I've been at the school that I'm at now for the past 7 years. When I got started, I was, pretty fresh out of college and, kind of baby teacher. And, I had a lot to learn. And I feel like I grew a lot over those years. I went back for my master's degree about maybe 15 years into teaching. So I'd been in the classroom for a while. And in some ways, that was perfect timing for me because I was ready to absorb just so much information and so much craft and so much what could I do to improve my teaching and my instruction and then learn. And so about 2009 is when I went back and worked on my Master's of Education. And I feel like that's the start of kind of a real turn in my teaching. It started my journey as being a real advocate for authentic voices and reading in my curriculum. I had some classes that prompted me to do audits of my classroom library and do audits of the curriculum. And I discovered some holes, some things that, I had been doing for a long time just because the teacher before me had been doing it. And, really opened my eyes to what I was missing and how I was not serving my students the best way. So that was great. And it opened my eyes a lot. And I was able to make a lot of changes, I think, that have been so beneficial to me as an educator, but most importantly to my students as readers and their reading and lives. And it also started my journey as a writer. So I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I took a class where I had an opportunity to write something, and it got me thinking and had colleagues asking me, have you ever thought about writing a book yourself? And so kind of started me on that path as well.
That's pretty awesome. I really like the fact that you did an audit. Like when I was a first year teacher, my audit, no, I can't even call it an audit. It was whatever the teacher before me or the veteran teachers in the building gave me. And that kind of started my foundation of what I had as a teacher. And
absolutely,
like about an audit, I really didn't focus on like the quality of what I had. It was more the quantity. And so I had to make sure that my room looked very cute and that the spaces were created so that when the students walked in, there was a finished product. Like, of course, as years went on, I was like, that was the exact opposite of what I should have done, like
right.
Complete opposite. But, like you said, as a baby teacher, as a first year teacher, you're just like, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, exactly. And I think I the same way. I was focused on the quantity of books, and there were a lot of classics in my classroom library, and books that I picked up through, like, say, the book fairs and catalogs, and there some of those were problematic, and I realized that through looking at, like, what I was offering students. So yeah, I definitely learned and grew a lot.
Yeah. So how would your students describe your classroom?
I think they would describe it as creative. I'm always talking to them about choice, and supporting what it is that they're interested in, whether that's through book talking the books that I'm reading and asking them what they're reading, encouraging them to push themselves. In the writing assignments that we do, I'm always looking for ways to engage them in slightly different ways. So, like, my technology background comes in, and for example, with our summer reading this beginning of this school year, I had my students do a comic as a form of a summary. And so, that was like a little bit of a visual way of looking at the story for them. And we still wrote, but it was an entry point that I think really engaged them. And so, looking for that, and looking for also, I think, opportunities for them to share their voices authentically, either with other within their class, with their classmates as well, but also outside of our classroom. So, things like the global read aloud and connecting with other classrooms around books and having conversations and doing blog posts are all things that I'm excited to kind of expose them to and get them sharing.
Yeah, what resonates with me are the words looking for opportunities for my students to share their voices. Like, man, that is really powerful when you think about what students are able to do, like how they are more engaged, because my teacher is looking for these opportunities for me to share my voices. And it's not a matter of, here's a program, this is what the writing prompt says, and this is what we're going to do. But it's, no, let me see how we can invite or provide opportunities for you to feel a part of this space.
Yeah, and I think the great thing too is that with that becomes the opportunity for them to be in conversation with each other around these ideas. So they did a little Padlet for me this week where they answered a couple of questions about kind of the pre-reading for a book that we're starting, and then talking about there was a question about what identity is. What does that word mean to them? And then they responded to each other and talked about, like, I agree with you, or I have this in common with you. You shared this detail that I have in my life too. And so always to have those interactions between them, and not just between me and them, that it's a class and a community.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So let's talk writing. This is like, I told you, this is like me selfishly excited about this conversation, because I think, oftentimes we focus so much on reading that writing sometimes gets the short end of the stick, or there isn't a true understanding of the connection of both the reading and the writing and how they complement each other. So, in saying that, what would you say the state of writing instruction is in education today?
I think there's a lot of good conversations happening, and I think the 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 realization from teachers that students need, just like we've said, there's that connection between reading and writing. They need choice in their writing the same way they need choice in their reading. So I think the recognition that those formulaic ways that sometimes we've taught in the past are very limiting to students. And I know within my own school, we've talked about, yes, students sometimes need scaffolding, and they need models, and they need to see examples of, kind of like mentor text in reading. They need mentor text in writing, but there also needs to be room for them to be themselves and to, have their voice come through. And, we have to be mindful of that with, not being so lockstep with, the 5-paragraph essay, or the 3.5 paragraph, and all of these different things that students don't have. They don't learn to be creative and original and to show their voices. And, also to, we've talked a lot in my department this past year too about the different kinds of literacies that students bring from home, and respecting those ways of speaking and ways of writing, and giving them opportunities to utilize those in more ways. So I think, again, there's room for growth, definitely, but there are conversations where people are starting to see, how necessary a lot of this thinking and action needs to be towards letting students share what they have on their minds in creative and authentic ways.
Yeah, that choice really sticks out for me as you were talking about that, and the power that comes from a student choosing what it is that they're going to write about. And I know for educators, sometimes that's uncomfortable, because it's like, how am I going to grade this? What am I going to put in my lesson plan? Like, what does this look like? And I understand that there are certain restrictions that make it really hard at the school level to do this.
Right.
But if we want engagement and we want to see our students grow as writers, we have to get them engaged in the process and help them to understand the why behind it. I know in our state, we saw a huge shift in the instruction, the writing instruction, when the standardized tests changed. So used to, when I first started teaching, there used to be an assessment that it was a writing day assessment from the state. And so they would have 5 days to go through the writing process. The first day was 90 minutes on the brainstorming, and then it would just kind of go from there. And it would be on a topic outside of text. So there was a prompt, students had to brainstorm, and they could go from there. And then there was a shift. And when that shift happened, there was a connection of reading to writing. And that was more of what that assessment looked like. And so the expectation was, in order to have a writing piece, you must use evidence from the text to support your writing. And so now it became this force of, here is a text, you must use it and weave it within your storyline. And that right there put writing in a box for students. So now the shift in instruction changed because students did not know how to do that. And I would go into schools and they would say, we had the Georgia Milestones. This is the Georgia Milestones writing block. I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. No, don't teach to a test.
Yeah.
But, that was what it kind of boiled down to. It was a 30-minute Georgia Milestones writing block. And no longer were we talking about that creative or that choice that students experience.
Yeah. And I totally understand that. I think, there's definitely a place for the certain skills that we feel like students need to be able to do the kind of writing that they might encounter when they get to high school, when they get to college. But it is really, I know, limiting for teachers when you have the assessment and the certain things that you have to do because the students are going to be tested on it. And so I definitely feel for, teachers in that situation. I fortunately, am in a system where I in the independent schools where it's a little bit more open. And so there's a little bit more freedom for thinking about how you construct the curriculum. But I think even within that, there's definitely ways that teachers can, give the opportunities for those moments. And I think everything, we talk about volume is so important, just like with reading, volume is important, writing as well. And not everything has to be assessed. And so even just to give students, a few minutes as an entry ticket or an exit ticket to, write about something, different formats and different topics, or something that they choose that isn't necessarily assessed, can give those opportunities as well.
Yeah. I remember there was a homework assignment. I think one of the challenges of being a parent educator is that you can't take your hat off in the parent mode. And so you're going
Yes.
talking with teachers, your child's teachers, and you're just sitting there like, okay, let me take my teacher hat off. Let me do this. But when my son, he was in fourth grade, he's the middle of three children. And so he was in fourth grade, and his teacher gave him a homework assignment, and he had to go through the writing process in one night. And I was
Oh
like,
my.
what is,
Oh.
and I was like, you can't do this. You can't do this. And I'm like trying to hold it in and like honor, not honor, but respect the teacher
Sure.
in their request, and try to find a way of having a conversation of that is not how we do that. But it was a wonder as to why he didn't get quality products when it came to the writing. Now, we were very fortunate the next year. We had a great fifth grade teacher who, hands down to this day, Miss Anderson, if you're listening, best fifth grade teacher for both of my boys. It was just an amazing, my younger daughter didn't get an opportunity to get her, but again, she gave that love for reading, and now they are just great writers.
That's excellent. That's wonderful.
Okay, so in November, there is something, let me make sure I say it right. NaNoWriMo. Did I say that right?
That is correct. Okay. Yes.
I feel like I need to have dashes in between, but so it's coming upon November 1st. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that and how you incorporate it into your classroom?
Yes. So November stands for National Novel Writing Month, which is abbreviated to be NaNoWriMo. And it is a writing event that hundreds of thousands of people across the world all participate in the month of November. So with adults, the challenge that people accept is to write a 50,000 word novel in 30 days. So adults sign up. There's a website where you can keep track of your progress and, enter, you promise to write every day or as much as you can, and you log your word count. And hopefully if you get to the end of the month and you reach that 50,000 word goal, it's winning, you win, so you meet your goal. But there's also a component called the Young Writers Program. And so with the Young Writers, it's for anyone in K through 12. And the goal is personal. So they get to set the goal that they would like to reach. And teachers, there's a classroom component, so teachers can sign up, enroll their class. And that's what I have done for about 9 years now. So my students and I announced to them, somewhere not too close to November, but I give them, usually a week or two to think about it, not to get too nervous. And I say, guess what? We are going to write together in the month of November. You guys are going to write a novel. And, their mouths drop open and they kind of look a little scared at first. But, I explained to them that, I usually give them a minimum word count. And there are all sorts of resources on the website that, help teachers kind of construct the right environment. So, I pick something really very manageable for my fifth grade students. 4,000 words is their minimum. So that's about, 1,000 for every grade level minus a little bit, so they feel comfortable. And I tell the students, that's like 250 words a day. That's like barely a paragraph. You've got, all of this time that we're going to dedicate in class in the month to write together. And I'm going to take the challenge with you. So I'm writing right along with them. So they see me as their teacher writing and trying to accomplish the same goal, although my goal is the adult goal. I don't get to do the smaller goal.
I know, I would like that other goal.
I know, but they're so excited, and it really, over the past many years that I've done it, has been, I think, one of the best experiences. My students, when I have some of them again in sixth grade, or when they go on and they talk about writing experiences that they really enjoyed. In the past, some of my colleagues will say, oh, I had a student, we were talking about writing experiences, and they mentioned NaNoWriMo was one of the most fun, the most, exciting for them, because they felt like they took on a challenge and, they accomplished it. And even besides that, it's just that freedom of, you have this idea, you're allowed to think about, I'm not giving them a topic, they get to choose what they want to write about. And we're all working together on our own goals and supporting each other. And they see me as their teacher, doing it right alongside them. So it's really a great, and it teaches them so many lessons outside of just the writing skills, about goal setting and adapting to, when they get stuck, what do you do? And supporting each other. So it's been wonderful.
Agency, like I hear it just throughout. They're starting to just own that. I'm not making you do anything. I'm not trying to convince you of why you should do it. This is you doing it to meet your goal, and you're 100% in. That is really awesome. What do you notice that excites them the most about this process?
I think it's that that ability to decide what they want to write. And so we'll talk about, there's some curriculum materials that NaNoWriMo provides that you can use, but of course, you can also, develop your own little activities and things that you want to organize with your classes. But I talked to them about like what makes a good book. And so we look at like the books that they really love, and what are the elements of those books that made them something that you love. And so we start talking about like things like the protagonist and the antagonist and the conflict, and what makes a good conflict. And then they start to think about, okay, so if I'm going to make a story, what kind of story would I like to make? What genre might it be, and what kind of conflict? And they're amazingly creative. Some will write about realistic stories. Sometimes if they are into a sport, it might be related to something that they do outside of school. I've got tons and tons of fantasies and all sorts of, stories about, other worlds. And so I think it's just that freedom that they can really do, whatever they want. And I think sometimes it's a little overwhelming at first because they're so unused to that ability. They're so used to being given a topic and being given a lot of limitations on things that they can do. And so this is kind of one of those opportunities where, yes, they have some guidelines, they have a certain amount that they're trying to reach, but it's a goal that they can set for themselves. And but we do it together, and they see everyone is working on their own stories, and they get so excited to share what they're working on with their classmates.
Yeah. It's kind of like their squad, their writing squad, their community.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I definitely would be excited if my peers were doing something with me, even though it's not the same story, but it's kind of like just the energy in the room. We're all working on this so that we can celebrate together. And then you build the,
right.
The compassion and the encouragement starts to flow throughout. Motivation starts to flow throughout the classroom because of that.
Yeah, and I find that because we do it early in the year, that sort of community that we develop really does set a tone for all of the other things we do later, whether they're discussions about the books we're reading. We, after we do all that writing in November, we set it aside for a little bit to, let us have a chance to separate, give a little distance to the writing, and then come back. And that's something that I talk to them about, that, real writers try to do also, that, when you're drafting, sometimes you're really close to your work. And when you put it aside, even for a short while, and come back to it, it lets you're able to see things that you couldn't see before. But we talk about what it is to share your work with others, and how to give feedback to other people. So it really is kind of a beginning step of something that we work on all through the year in terms of how to talk about our writing and how to share and how to revise. So it's a great program.
So speaking of novels, you have a book that is coming out soon, A Comb of Wishes. Can you share with us a little bit about the book and just the inspiration around writing this book?
Yeah, so I have my advanced reader copy here. So A Comb of Wishes, this is my ARC, comes out
Beautiful.
comes out with HarperCollins Quiltree Books in February of 2022, so February 8th, and it's up for pre-order now. But it is a book that actually was a NaNoWriMo novel. So that's always one thing I tell my students, that 2013 was the second time that I had attempted to do NaNoWriMo, and the first time that I did it with students. And that was the story that I wrote that year. And it's come a long way since then. It's been revised, multiple times. So I have all sorts of stories to talk about with my classes about what it takes to become a published writer. But the story is based on my own heritage a little bit. My family on my dad's side is from the Caribbean, from Barbados. And so the book is set in the Caribbean, and it's a fantasy about a girl who has just recently lost her mother, and she's grieving, her loss. And she also has, just such an interest in the sea and in creating things with sea glass. And so, one day she's on the beach with a friend looking for glass, and hears a sound that she can't ignore, and follows it and finds this ancient box. And it's battered and worn, and she doesn't really know where it's come from. And when she's able to open it finally, inside there's a beautiful hair comb. And when she touches it, it connects her to this dangerous kind of mermaid. So this mermaid who says that she's taken this that belongs to her. This comb is hers, but she is bound by some rules. Magic always has rules, and in order for her to get it back, she has to offer a wish. And so she offers my main character, Keela, a wish in exchange for her comb to be returned. And of course, the thing that Keela wants most is for her mother to come back.
Oh, wow.
So that's the premise of the story.
Oh my goodness. So what you're saying is I am going to pre-order this for Florida and myself to read together. It sounds like an awesome, awesome book. I can't
Thank
wait
you.
for her to get her hands. She loves to read. So
Oh.
definitely be your first review, maybe. I don't know.
Thank you.
So how
Yeah.
does being an author influence you and motivate you as a teacher?
That's a great question. I think that one of the things has been that I look at books differently than I did when I, was for many, many years, as I said, I, was in the classroom just as an English teacher before I went back to school and started working on my my second degree. And so I read and I taught books, but when I became serious about pursuing publication and learning how to write, I kind of wanted to educate myself on the craft of writing. And so I look at stories a little bit differently. So we talk sometimes with students about reading like a writer. And when you read a book, you read for pleasure, but then you can read more carefully and think about, how did the author do whatever that thing is that they did? How did they make me feel this way? How did they create that tension? So I feel like that has given me kind of a great avenue to talk with students, because the things that I have learned as a writer, and can give them kind of that insight into what authors are thinking about as they put stories together, and layering in levels of meaning and thematic elements. I think that there are always students who think about, they love books and think about, like, could I be a writer? And you could say, yes, you definitely can be a writer. And this is actually, how it happens. Like, how do the books that you love end up on the shelf? What's the process that people go through to become a published writer? So I'm able to talk to them a little bit about that, and like the journey that I've had through publishing, how long it's taken me, what are some of the things that I've had to do. So that's been great. And then, as I said, also just as looking at like the craft of writing and talking to them about, like, looking beyond just like the story as something that you enjoy, but thinking about how storytellers create these experiences that we have, and all of it's intentional, and how they do that, and what can they take from that into their own work.
Yeah. So how did you, I'm sure you brought your book to school to show them the cover. Did you? So,
I do. There's 3 copies of my, like I said, it's not out yet, but I have advanced copies. And so there are 3 copies of my my advanced copy in our school library.
oh my
And students
goodness.
have been signing up on a waiting list. So a
How
few of them
cool.
have started to read it.
How cool. It's like my teacher is an author. I am reading my teacher's book.
It is. It's
And
so
it's
sweet when I see them with it, or they'll say, "This is Miss Stringfellow. I got off the waiting list today, and
oh
I
my
got your
God.
book."
Oh,
So
now that is priceless. That is absolutely priceless. That's pretty cool that they get to do
it
that.
is.
And then
Yes.
to hear their reviews, like, okay, I remember, I love this, and oh my god. And then they
Well, they're pretty shy about it, and I'm shy about it too. And so, but sometimes I'll hear from a parent, and they'll say, you know, my student, got your book, and they said they really loved it. I'm like, oh, that's so great. They didn't want to tell me because I think it made them feel awkward, but that made me so happy to hear.
it would really be cool to have a book talk. That would really be cool to have a book talk with your students to just hear. I mean, just
Yes, it is. I had the experience recently where one of the students who had just gotten the book from the library, we always share at the beginning of the week what we've been reading, and I'm always bringing in books to share, and one of them shared, well, I got Miss Stringfellow's book, and so she book talked my book, and I was just like, this is such a strange experience to have, her explaining my plot to the other students, and I'm standing there, but it was wonderful.
oh my goodness. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Just sharing what you're doing with your students around writing and making that connection of reading to writing, and just keeping them engaged in the process. I really love how you connect opportunities outside of the classroom to motivate them as a writer. And it really helps to see helps the students to see the connection to the world, that it's bigger than just me teaching you how to form a sentence, but it's really getting you to love writing, to love reading. So that is really, really awesome that you're doing that with your students. So now we are going to go into our rapid fire questions. This is the fun part. Everything else is great, but this is like the fun part where our listeners get to really connect with you as Lisa and just the different things that are your favorites. So are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. First question. What's your favorite season of the year?
It's so funny because we had a retreat at school recently, and that was a question that the students were asked to go to one side of this area if they, like this season, and the other side. And I was one of those people that I was in the middle. So my favorite season is either or both spring and fall. So I just love kind of like that temperate, it's sunny, it's nice, it's not too hot, it's not too cold. And, I like both. So fall if I had to pick one, but spring and fall.
Spring and fall. Okay. So you're like in between, a sprawl.
Yes.
That's what you
are. Exactly.
Okay, got it. All right. Now, this one, you might need a moment to think about this. Who was your favorite character in a book or a movie? I know it's hard to pick just one, but one that just kind of comes to mind first.
Oh gosh, my favorite character in a book or movie. It is hard to pick one. I would say, I was a kid who I loved reading growing up, and I loved fantasies. And I would say that one of the inspirations for me with writing was that I didn't often see brown skinned characters like in those kind of adventures that I like to read, like, whether it's like Chronicles of Narnia. I think you see a lot more, like Black characters in like historical fiction than you did in like fantasy stories. So I don't know. I think I loved like A Wrinkle in Time, and so like Meg from A Wrinkle in Time. I loved, you know, things like Lucy and the Narnia Chronicles. I think movies, like I love The Little Mermaid, obviously, because I ended up writing a different kind of mermaid. But yeah, I think, you know, those fantastical stories where kids get to be on adventures.
Yeah, it makes me think about Dr. Gloria Latson-Billings' work around mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And as you were talking, I was thinking, what would I say as my character? It probably would be that I'm drawn to Black female characters that
Hmm.
I'm drawn to, and those that are have big loud voices where they kind of command the space when they walk in. And I think now where I am in, you know, just who I am, I think that would be why I'm more drawn to those characters, because I see so much of myself.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking in my sixth grade class about windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and Dr. Rudinson's Bishop, and like that that
Yeah,
idea that like you
sorry,
should find.
yes, thank you for
No, but Dr. Billings also about like the culturally responsive, you
yes,
know,
yes,
teaching. It's all connected, and that they're, you know, being in publishing, like I can kind of like see that there's a lot of growth that has happened in representation in books, but there's still a super long way to go. You know, there's a very well-known infographic that's on the internet about, I think it was 2018, all of the characters of color. So in children's books, about 3,000 children's books are published every year. Characters of color had less representation than animals.
yes.
So like, I think it was 27% were animals and others, whether those are trucks or, you know, inanimate objects, but Black, brown, you know, all people of color, that percentage was still less than animals as representation. So I
Yeah.
think it's so important.
Yeah, and thank you for, you know, you have two powerhouses in your head, Dr. Gloria Latsing Billings, and then Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop's work. And I think they complement, definitely. I know that they complement each other, because that culturally relevant teaching is just as important when we're talking about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, and figuring out as a teacher, how do I change the way I choose books or choose stories to tell? Whose voices am I inviting into this space? It's very, very important, because we have students that need to see more than the narrative that we keep putting in curriculum or putting in our textbook.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now, oh, here's the last question. Which do you prefer, cake or cupcake?
Oh, I would probably say cake because I I love cupcakes because they're portable, but I've seen so many interesting just like tech, like I'm a Food Network type of person. Like I love to watch those kinds of shows and like people making, you know, Great British Baking Show. And I just think there's so much fun that you can have with the cake and flavors. And I would be all about trying lots of different types. So
Yes.
probably cake.
I do like how cupcakes are portable. I think that might be a dangerous thing for me, because I could grab a couple at the same time.
Right.
So, what tips would you give to educators that would like to start to do this work or continue on with this work of making sure that our students feel like they are part of the writing process, or just motivating them as writers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I shared already about, you know, if you're interested in something like NaNoWriMo, um, and also I think I mentioned just briefly at the beginning, there's a program called the Global ReadAloud, which is kind of a similar idea in the sense that, you know, hundreds of kids from all over the world and classrooms and teachers are coming together to read the same books. And so, it's kind of like that same community experience that you get to share. I think there are great opportunities like that you can participate in. But I think even beyond that, just within your own classroom, to think about like, what are the ways that I can, weave in these opportunities for choice, opportunities for a little bit of like, freedom for your students to be able to try new things, and make mistakes, and that's okay, to share with each other. I think one of the things that my students love is when, after NaNoWriMo and kind of like the high of that goes down, when they come back to their stories later, I put them in little groups and we call them critique groups, kind of like how writers, professional writers have critique. You have partners that you share your work with, and you get to ask them questions. And it's not about line editing, it's about kind of question sharing, and like what was your intent here, and what kinds of feedback would you like to hear. So I think just there's lots of ways through, whether that's writing groups, book clubs where kids can talk about things and kind of share their ideas, that you can just do even just within your own classroom.
Great. So how can folks just find out more about what you're doing? Any social media handles that you want to share with the listeners?
Sure. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram. Been on Twitter a lot longer, connected with a lot of teachers. But my handle is at Engage Readers. So just ENGAGE Readers. And it's the same on Twitter and Instagram. And then I have a website, lisastringfellow.com, that you can find out more and get my handles there too.
Awesome. And what I'll do is leave in the show notes the link to pre-order your book.
Thank you.
Well, folks, please, please, please. It sounds so exciting. I mean, it sounds so wonderful. So definitely, I'm excited personally to pre-order that book for my daughter so that we can read it together. So I'll definitely leave that so that other students outside of your students can give a review. Maybe it won't be so awkward.
Yes, that's true. Thank you.
All right, and to my listeners, well, let me just say, Lisa, thank you so much for just being in conversation with me. This is such an important conversation to have, to help teachers to just provide more opportunities for choice and writing opportunities for students in the classroom, as well as reading opportunities. Sometimes we kind of get caught up with the tests and the standardized tests at the end of the year, and we forget that we are creating world changers. We are creating innovative thinkers, like not creating, we are really pulling that out of our students, providing a space for their brilliance to come alive. And so it's important that we don't make the end goal a standardized test, but we help them to see how what they're doing connects with their very world that they're living in each and every day. So thank you again for this conversation.
Thank you.
And to my listeners, thank you so much for listening in on this wonderful conversation. And as always, happy teaching. Okay.
Bye.
You did it. Record.